No makeup today, sorry guys, because I am gardening and I'm just doing this in between, so sorry. Not everyone uses a future log, but I quite like them because it allows me to note down events for months that I haven't laid out yet in my bullet journal. I'm very much a month at a time planner. And when I started bullet journaling, I actually only laid out a week at a time, so my future log was essential. While I create this future log for my Midori notebook, I will talk you through the decisions you'll need to make about spacing your boxes and your text, and I'll talk you through how to deal with a mistake. The first step is to decide how to divide your page. I wanted to get all 12 months on one double spread, so that meant 6 months per page. I'm using a pencil to draw some guidelines for my boxes so I can work out the spacing. How your boxes are spread across the page is affected by the number of dots on your page. In this journal, there are 29 dots across the page, creating 28 columns, which is 14 centimetres wide. Creating 3 columns across the page is difficult. I could have 3 boxes that are 4 centimetres wide with a 1 centimetre gap between each of them, but when I tried this option first, I realised that it would be difficult to send to my calendars. Because of the 7-day week, you need 3.5 centimetres for each calendar. So a 4 centimetre wide box means you'd have to have the days lined up on a line rather than a space to get it in the middle of the box. The alternative was to have 3 boxes that are 4.5 centimetres wide with no gap between them. This is perfect for my calendars that are 3.5 centimetres, as there is a 5mm gap either side, but then I'm left with 5mm somewhere on my page. The centre row of dots in this Midori journal is very close to the spine, so I decided I was happy to leave the 5mm space at the centre, then have my 3 boxes with no space in between. There are 38 dots down the page, creating 37 rows. The odd number of rows makes working out the length of the boxes easier. I can have 2 boxes with a 5mm gap between them. The next step is to work out spacing within the box. I started out allowing 1 centimetre height for lettering the months, then a 5mm gap before 5 rows for the calendars. Below that would be space for noting events. Once again, I chose a simple lettering style from the options saved on my Pinterest board, and I've added a link to the video description to get you to that board. These letters aren't uniform like the last lettering style I showed you. I originally thought I'd use lowercase, but they were a bit too irregular, and as I was only using 3 letters to represent each month, I changed my mind and used uppercase letters. As I showed you in my part 1 video, I've drawn a line in the middle of the space and started with the middle letter so I can be sure to get my spacing right. I soon realised that letters 1 centimetre high would not make the most of the width of the box and look a bit small. So I erased them and increased the lettering height to 1.5 centimetres, moving everything else down 1 row. Once lettering was done, I filled in the dates for the month of July, opting to write in pen straight away, only to discover that I hadn't allowed a row to put in the weekdays. Not the end of the world, but I really like having the days of the week there, so I really had to find a fix. There are several options. I could have used whiteout, or I could have put the days of the week below the calendar just for July and then fixed it up for the other months. But instead I went to the end of my journal and I cut a square of paper out that would cover the calendar. I cut it to a shape that would cover the text, cutting between dotted rows so I could line up the dots on the patch with the dots on the page, then glued it on. I was then able to allow 6 lines for the calendar with the top row dedicated to the days of the week and continued this layout for all 12 months. I like to use 5 lines for my calendars to make them a consistent size. This means that when the month needs 6 lines, I just put the few extra numbers back on line 1, like in September and December. I decided to colour the lettering with my mild liners. There is a big range of colours in mild liners and they're very popular. In my pen test, they hadn't gone through the page, but the ghosting was much worse here because when you write lettering, you tend to hold the pen down at the end of a stroke, which helps the ink bleed through the page. It wasn't too bad though, so I was still able to do a spread on the next page. You won't avoid ghosting until you use a paper that's at least 120 GSM, and if you want to be really safe, with ghosting you need to go to 160 GSM. There's a few papers below that don't ghost, but 160 GSM is pretty reliable. 160 GSM journals are more expensive though, and I think for your first journal you're better off going for a cheaper option just because then you're less afraid about mucking up a page. Don't forget to wait for inks to dry before erasing any pencil marks. As I've noted before, inks dry very quickly in this journal, but that's unusual. The same goes for highlighting over text. Do a test run on another piece of paper to learn whether highlighter will smear the pen ink. If it does, try another pen and make sure you let it dry well before highlighting. I hope this has helped you worry less about making mistakes. I make mistakes all the time and I use this patch paper method a lot. This example also demonstrates the benefits of writing in pencil before you put down your ink. It's been lovely to have you join me while I made this spread. I know I promised this at the end of part 1, but I promise the next video, part 3, will be trying out some simple themes in your journal for a weekly spread and your monthly title page. Make sure you subscribe so you know when I publish the video. See ya.